Hello, this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show. I want you to imagine $8,000 being placed in your account today. $8,000 being placed in your account for the purposes of educating your child. $8,000 being placed in the account, and you get to direct to what educational institution those funds will be directed to. $8,000 being placed in your account, and now you are in full control of the destiny of the educational path of your child. How does that feel? That feels good. That feels empowering. That feels right. That feels good because we are removing one layer of the Texas deep state from our lives. We are removing one layer of government, one unnecessary layer of government from our lives, and we're giving ourselves back more freedom. That is empowering. And here's how it would work. So, should this come to fruition, school choice, there would be a wide range of options for your child to choose which schools to go to. A lot of options to select from. There would be schools of different levels of difficulty. There would be schools that would specialize based on subject area or profession. There may be more schools that may be more math-centric, or may focus on the English language arts, or focus on theater and dance. There would be a wide range of options for your child. And there would be an interview process and a selection process. So what would happen is, from all of these schools that you have to choose from, you would go on their website, you'd do your research, you'd call in, they'd send you their flyers, you'd go to the campus and visit the school, you'd meet with the staff. There would be an interview and selection process where you would meet the school's personnel and staff. They would meet you and your child, and a decision would be made from all parties on what is the best decision for your child. And if that $8,000 is not enough for that school, there would be scholarship money, private donations that would rise up to cover the difference if the tuition is slightly out of reach of the $8,000 deposited funds. And the point is that in the end, your child is in a better position, because we would have a market-based school choice situation. There would be market options available to you. And in a market economy, bad ideas are eradicated and good ideas are promoted, and they become the norm, and everybody wins. And schools must compete for your students. And so as they compete, the good schools will continue to flourish, and bad schools will have to change their ways. And this was a proposal. This was a proposal put forth by Texas Governor Greg Abbott and the Texas Republicans. It was called Senate Bill 8, Texas Senate Bill 8. And this bill was highly critiqued. There were a lot of amendments put into it. And in the end, it was considered by many to be the greatest school choice proposal to ever exist. It was considered to be a model school choice proposal that, if it would be implemented, if it would be enacted, it would be a model for other states to follow. And again, we would have Texas leading the way for the country. And it was a good proposal, and it came to the House floor for a vote, and it failed. It failed because of Texas Democrats. Texas Democrats, the party of slavery, brought more bad ideas to our communities. Texas Democrats voted against this bill. 63 Democrats voted against it. 0 Democrats voted for school choice. And why did they do it? Because they want to keep you pinned down with their depressed economy, pinned down with their hyperinflation, pinned down with you paying for their endless wars, pinned down with constantly raising gas prices. And now they don't want to just pin you down. They want to pin your child down. Pin your child down into a failing school system. And this is what the Democrats do. And they do it under the premise that our government-run schools are somehow sacrosanct. They are above reproach. They are something that we should almost worship. And that's how they look at our government schools. This is a completely false notion. It is the child that comes first. But according to Democrats, the schools are here to serve the schools. The schools are here to serve the schools and the teachers' unions, and the children are just something that comes along the way. But the truth is it is the children that should come first. But the way that Democrats pitch this is they use the children as pawns in their game for power. They're using children as tools in their play for more control over your life. The child is a political pawn to the American Democrat Party. And the question is, a constant question that we have with the American Democrats, with the Texas Democrats, is who has autonomy over the child, the parent or the state? There is this constant wrestling match with the Democrat Party over the autonomy of the child. They constantly want to force their bad ideas on your children. And I'll give you just a couple of quick examples. The Democrats, during the Wuhan flu, forced the masks on your child, regardless of parental consent. And they were pushing that vaccine, and they wanted to force that on the children without parental consent. There is illicit pornographic materials placed in our school libraries without parental consent. And now the Democrats want to put your kid in a school that their system decides, regardless of your opinion on the matter. And so now you have no choice. And so whatever school you're zoned for is what you're stuck with. If there's a school that has this obsession with the hypersexualization of children that is constantly coming from the Democrat Party, if there's a school that has that agenda, your kid must endure it. If it's a school that constantly promotes homosexuality, as Democrats constantly promote homosexuality, if the school promotes that agenda, your child must be exposed and endure it. If it's a school that is exposed to rampant gang violence and drug use, your child must endure it. If it's a school that's simply underperforming, your child must endure it, because in this country, under American Democrats, you have less choices, less freedoms. That's the way that things are. And so this is the Chris Heasley Show. And on this show, we are going to give you all of the ideas, the content, the information that you need to take back your towns, your communities, and your country. And we're going to give you those ideas, but what comes with it is an obligation, a duty for you to get into the political active mode and begin becoming a political activist, getting engaged with your local community at the local level. That is the whole purpose of this. And so what you can view this opening monologue as is a call to action for you to call your local representatives, call the local Democrat Party, and tell them what you think about their opposition to school choice. Go to the school board meetings and let the Democrats know what you think of their opposition to school choice. Go visit the state reps, make an appointment with your state representative, and go let them know how you feel about the Democrats' opposition to school choice. And with that being said, on today's show, the Chris Heasley Show, we have two guests on the line. We have G2. G2, are you there?
I'm here. Good afternoon.
Excellent. Okay, I had to turn you up there, G2. I'm not sure if you were in on that one. And Adam Schoaf.
Yes.
Adam Schoaf. And Adam, quickly tell us what office you are running for.
I'm currently running for Fort Bend ISD School Board Trustee position number 2.
Great. Well, I gave sort of an overview of one of the primary issues that's been one of the biggest issues in the state of Texas, certainly one of the biggest issues in education over the past year. But Adam, I want to ask you, you're running for Fort Bend School Board. Go ahead and give me an idea. What are the driving issues right now in Fort Bend schools?
Well, a lot of the driving issues, one of them, which is a big proponent to why I'm running is CTE, career technical education. You know, I'm only 32 years old, and the amount of my peers that are living at home with mom and dad at 32 years old is just staggering. There's a lack of kids who go through these CTE programs graduating high school with actual state certified credentials and taking state licensing exams. And also I feel that the building is kind of far away from the individual campuses, and I'd like to see some changes with that. I'm concerned about the fiscal responsibility overall of the district, and I just kind of feel like the trend overall is going to consist of the schools turning into a place that wouldn't provide my daughter, you know, I got a 9-year-old daughter, with the quality education that she deserves.
So does Fort Bend, do they already have technical training? Everyone knows that this is sort of an emerging area. It's an area that was put to the side, the trades, and now we have a shortage of those type of professionals. Is Fort Bend competitive in that area? Do they already have a program that's decent, or are you suggesting they need to add to it?
They need to add to it and make a number of changes to it. There is a CTE program at Fort Bend. It's just not very geared towards graduating high school with the actual certificate training required to get a job. Like when I graduated high school, through the school that I went to, I was certified as a firefighter, and I had an EMT basic, and I was ready to go to work. It's just, you know, back in 2009, there wasn't much of a job market. And on the flip side to that, I was all through high school working on my private pilot's license, and so which I had obtained long before I graduated. And there's never been public school opportunities for, you know, aviation. I'm not seeing it here for fire department. I just recently heard that one of the criminal justice programs within a school in the district was moved to a different campus, and I just really would like to see kids getting more exposures to careers that they could jump into fresh out of high school.
So you mentioned that you believe that the financial aspect of Fort Bend schools is not being run adequately. Didn't they just pass a big bond? I mean, shouldn't they be cashed up pretty well?
They did. There's the current trends. It's believed that they're going to be significantly over that very high bond, and particularly with the building of a new high school. But at the same time, these projections are based on, okay, what are the top of the line building materials, the top of the line everything, essentially think of Italian Corinthian leather on everything. So once that's actually worked through, I'm kind of seeing that it's probably going to be an unknown at how much over. It's just, it'd be kind of nice. I've got a little bit of background in construction, and it'd be kind of nice to have somebody on the board who would know if, you know, our tax money is getting ripped off or not.
Mm-hmm. So, G2, do you have any comments to say on just overall school funding, on you know, these bonds that they're passing, and if they're sufficient enough to give the schools what they need to operate and to build and grow?
You know, in different places we've seen increasing tax rates on top of increasing tax bases. In other words, there's new construction that generates automatically more money for school systems. And then the school system is saying, even with more assets to tax, we need higher tax rates, because it seems that there's never enough money for any government entity. So if you're, and when you come to construction, it's an area where I think school boards are particularly weak and susceptible. They are typically not people that have a lot of construction background. Sometimes they're entirely made up of people from academia, which is just a disaster. So having somebody on a school board who can actually review a budget, analyze the budget, and use their own history and knowledge to come up with the right questions to ask, that could be extremely valuable. So I think you make a good point there. And when you come to fiscal responsibility and issuing bonds and raising taxes, another factor, of course, is the way school boards do forecasts, the way they forecast their cash flow. I've looked at a few school boards in different places, and I've seen they frequently overstate their forecast expenses, understate their forecast revenues, again, to justify additional taxes or bonds. So, raising fiscal responsibility or fiscal due diligence as an issue is a really important issue that's often overlooked, but yet should be a core function, because school boards are these most school boards, of course, funded by property taxes, maybe some income taxes, but those taxes are becoming, in many states, so significant they're pushing people out of their homes.
What are the numbers, Adam?
Well, first off, G2 hit on something very interesting. They're overall in government employment, and I've been a government employee since I was 18 years old as a private in the military. I've heard a phrase over and over again in all aspects of government that I've ever been exposed to, that we have to spend this budget this fiscal year, or we're not going to get this money, or we're not going to get the money that we're budgeted this year next year if we don't spend it all, and which leads to frivolous spending. And that's a culture that I've kind of seen and encountered all throughout the government that needs to be changed, because frankly we're flushing our money down the drain. And as far as raising taxes, well, Fort Bend County is the 5th highest taxed county in the nation, and at one point it was the highest. I pay the amount that I pay in property taxes. My monthly mortgage would be the exact same on the house that I live in, the exact same house in San Diego, California, 3 blocks from the beach. I would have the same monthly payment on a house worth almost twice the amount. That's $1 million home. So the taxes, we've got the tax base for it. It's the books need to be looked at pretty carefully.
Okay, so I heard that Fort Bend schools had a deficit of maybe $48 million. I heard that a stat a year ago. What is it at now?
1.32 or 132 million.
132 million.
Yeah.
At an operating deficit.
Well, it's not an operating deficit. That's what goes down to all right, with all the projects in play. This is the top of the line, everything that they're projecting for. They're projecting for the worst case scenario. And it's just a matter of how much lower can we get that down to, and especially after the $1.2 billion bond, that's a lot of money to be short when 5 years ago the district wasn't in that kind of a state. However, we have an additional 20,000 students in the last 5 years. So it's a very rapidly growing district. Fort Bend County is the fastest growing county in the nation right now. So there's a lot of growing pains that need to be worked through, and there needs to be a different perspective and an anticipation of the changes that are going to occur.
How do you rectify the 100? And by the way, just so I can clarify, with the bond, we're still at a negative?
Yeah, that's from what I'm reading. Yes.
Okay, so how is that ever rectified?
Well, a lot of it comes down to we're not going to be getting Corinthian leather, and we're not going to be having granite countertops on everything and slab marble floors, because this is all just projections that are kind of and it's almost like the way that a lot of this is released is almost to be a bit of a shock factor. Maybe I don't know if it's to promote more bonds, but that's definitely not what I'm seeing as the right way.
You keep saying Corinthian leather. Was that actually proposed, or was that actually?
No, that wasn't. I'm just using that as an analogy. I mean, it could be, it could be. I could replace that with, the Fort Bend ISD patrol cars are going to be, Porsche Cayennes or.
Right. Let me give you an example, if I could.
Yes, please.
I was in a school board meeting one day with a group who was contemplating a new scoreboard for their football field. Now, this is not a stadium. It's just a football field the kids play on. This isn't a big thing. Their bids ranged from something in the neighborhood of $15,000 for a scoreboard that worked all the kids could use it. It would work for different sports because on that field they sometimes, I think, played soccer or something else. I don't know.
Right.
Or they could spend $125,000 and get something really cool. And it'd be beautiful. It'd have moving graphics and these neon things and computerized screens. Or they could spend $250,000 and buy a screen that would require them to hire a full-time employee to operate. Of course, the school board wanted the $250,000 and the extra full-time employee. Citizens, of course, came to the room and said, what are you doing? Get the cheapest thing that works. We're just keeping track of kids playing sports on the weekend. I mean, what are we doing here? And that's an example of the kind of excess that happens. It is when a salesman's in there telling, listen, for $250 you can get this, and it's not their money, if the citizens don't find out and push back, they just buy the expensive thing, they hire the full-time employee, and no one ever notices.
Well, and G2...
That's an example, I think, of what you're saying.
And G2, it gets worse than that. 5 years down the road, there's an entirely different board of directors who decide that they want to rebuild the stadium altogether, and they end up knocking it down anyway and building a whole new stadium on top of spending all that money. So,
right.
And it's a never-ending... it's a never-ending cycle of bureaucracy, and that's kind of one of the things that I'm getting tired of, and I'm seeing that type of spending and that type of bureaucracy is just, nobody's caring about the kids and their education and what happens to them when they become adults anymore. And
that's right.
And
right.
And that's where I fear for my daughter Mariah. I want her to have the best opportunity at life the day she turns 18 and is graduating high school.
Okay, I got a question here. Someone wrote this in. In May 2023, voters approved a $1.26 million bond for construction of a new campus, as well as other projects. Recently, it was brought to public attention that there is a $132 million shortfall. In other words, FBISD, Fort Bend ISD, doesn't have enough money to complete the bond project. How would you address this issue as it relates to fiscal responsibility and transparency?
Well, once again, obviously, that $132 million overage is this. These are the initial Grand Taj Mahal school options being presented by architects, with oversight on a little bit of knowledge on construction and knowledge on understanding how money is spent and how to make more money. It's a matter of cutting back. There needs to be a lot of cutting back on, we're not going to have whatever that fancy school district in Dallas is that has a food court in it, like a mall. We're not going to have something like that in our schools here. We just don't have that kind of money, and it's a school. It doesn't need to be grand. It has to be nice. It doesn't have to, once again, have Corinthian leather on all the seats.
Yeah. Any last words on that subject, G2?
Yeah, I think you're really getting into something that's really important and is underdone. In other words, when schools are being built out like this, they always start out with a reasonable proposal, and it is sort of the base. And then it starts to grow. They get to these huge numbers, which then become urgently necessary. Everything's urgently necessary. What doesn't, I don't think, from what I can gather, is not happening in every school system is that they don't go first through the process you're talking about and determine what is excess and what is not. And
Right.
that just has to happen, and that's just practical thought. The problem is a lot of these school systems have friends in the architecture and construction industries, because the next thing that has to happen is really hard-nosed negotiation. And if you've just got a bunch of academics sitting on a school board, truth be told, that's not going to be their strong suit. Their strong suit is making friends. So if you want to be friends with the contractors, you better pack in tens of millions of extra dollars. But if you want to negotiate the way a business would, that's possible. Government can do that. What has stopped them from doing that is the access to easy money, because school board members aren't pushing back, and voters are just simply not paying attention to these bond issuances, the shortfalls, and the budget. It's too much. It's too hard. Many of them just don't understand what's going on in school finances. So I think your focus on these things is very, very appropriate.
Exactly, and there also needs to be a question: is where has the money been going over the years? To include, they just passed an audit. I don't know how far back the audit is. I'd like to see an audit going back, 2013, 2014, just to ensure there's oversight on where our money has been going.
In another circumstance, a road department for a county came out and said we need more cash, and they proved that they needed it. They proved they were underfunded, that the revenue wasn't keeping up. What no one stopped to ask is, what's going on in the general fund? Where is all your other money going? The only money being allocated to roads in that particular county was money that was associated directly by virtue of the way it was raised, either a bond or a specific tax that was specifically set aside for roads. The general fund is disappearing. You have to step back and say, exactly where's all the money going? What are our priorities? Who's delivering the best educational impact for our children?
It's almost as if what our governments have gotten away with is they've made it sort of the de facto premise, the unquestioned premise that in order to do any project, it has to be a new debt, a new tax. The idea that they can actually run their entity with the operating budget is now something of the past. I think we've been bamboozled.
Well, and then there's all these different divisions within government organizations that are given budgets where that mentality of if we don't spend it this year, we won't get it next year is. And that's where I'd like to see a culture shift within the government that I'm running for office, to where the end of the year, you're not losing your budget. In fact, you're being incentivized for having more money in the bank for your division. And you now have a bigger operating budget for saving the district money. But, once again, I am only one vote.
There you go. Hey, guys, I want to jump back to a subject that Adam brought up at the beginning, career technical training. I feel like we kind of glossed over that. And I got a question from a listener. Fort Bend ISD lacks... One second. Fort Bend ISD lacks behind other districts as it relates to college, career, and military readiness.
CCMR.
A large percentage of students are not graduating with technical certifications to become employable, while others are not prepared to enter college or the military. When elected to the board, how would you address this issue?
Well, especially the military side. I am a veteran, U.S. Army. The big thing with CTE and CCMR is exposure. We would need to have somebody start acting as a liaison to military recruiters, along with our local National Guard and Air National Guard units. And it could be things as simple as, putting a Black Hawk on the football field, landing a Black Hawk helicopter on the football field, and having kids exposed to this amazing piece of machinery that defends our country, and getting excited about that and being driven to achieve the requirements in order to learn to fly that amazing piece of machinery. And just there's a lack of exposure overall, and that lack of exposure, that's why there's a lack of interest, and the lack of interest turns into there are now kids just ending up in CTE classes because they need an elective, or checking a box, and they're not there with their actual interests, and so they're not taking the state licensing exams, and they don't have the exam, they don't qualify for the job when they graduate.
You got any comments on that, G2?
Well, I think we've got a huge problem. It's not just in Fort Bend; it's across the country. As we've shifted the emphasis away from education, of course, there's always the emphasis on sports, fine. But as we've shifted it away from education and put the focus on social engineering issues, we've seen a direct impact on the performance of students in public schools across the country, and this has to come back. But one of the points you made earlier about technical training. There was a time in our nation where most every school, and certainly a school the size of Fort Bend's independent school district, had shop classes, and they had drawing classes, mechanical drawing. They had technical classes that train kids
Well,
in
G2
practical applications of the thing.
G2, aside
Go ahead.
from graduating high school certified as a firefighter, I had my MIG-TIG arc and oxyacetylene certificates as graduating as a senior in high school. So that there is like no welding shops anymore in schools, and that needs to be brought back.
Oh yeah, and if once you've learned to lay a bead in a welding class, even if you never weld again, that is a practical experience that stays with you for life. You learn things about safety and about equipment. You learn practical hands-on knowledge. You know, look, it's just not the case that everything can be done with an app on a phone. So those are really critical skills. What do you think it would have cost to go get that certification in a private post-high school education?
$2,800 per certificate.
Yeah, now that would be a good number. There's a really good school that's out in Arkansas. It's $23,000.
Holy cow!
So to go to, you know, as somebody trying to get certified in all those kinds of welding and all the skill sets that come with that, with supplies and training and the entire package. Actually, I'm sorry, this was in Nevada. In Nevada, I looked at one person going through a school like that. It was $23,000. So you think about having a child come out of high school equipped with that kind of knowledge. Not only can that be helpful in a college setting, I know somebody that went through an electrician course, came out as a certified electrician in high school, went on to become an electrical engineer in college. He ends up rewiring locomotives for a career as an engineer. It was incredible what he was able to end up doing.
Well, G2,
So,
there's another point here. You know, the culture today is when a kid turns 18, graduates high school, doesn't know what they want to do. Well, go get your bachelor's. Well, what in? I don't know. I'll figure it. You know, I'll find myself in high school. Well, that doesn't make any sense. They can be finding themselves on the pipeline making $120,000 a year as a welder, and when they do find themselves, now they got the capital to go through whatever degree program they want to.
That's a great point. That's really a great point. I know a situation where a young lady came out of a 4-year degree in a college, a very respected college. She had $180,000 in debt, and her degree was in medieval Russian poetry.
Oh,
because that's her bliss. That's where she found her bliss. Well, the other thing she found bliss doing was living in an apartment where she shared a bed and slept in shifts and worked as a waitress in a Manhattan eatery because she couldn't afford to even pay rent. She couldn't afford to pay half rent. She had to pay 1/4 of rent on a 2-bed single, small apartment. So this poor girl was, whisked through the system, told to follow her bliss, and she followed it right into despair. So practical skills must come back.
Well, the kids aren't taught cost versus benefit. An underwater basket weaving degree is not going to net you anything. And that's where.
I just want to say.
But an underwater welding degree, people in Texas will understand
$250,000
an underwater welding degree, yeah, that's the big
a ton.
One.
And 20 years into that, there are guys making $500,000 a year doing. I mean, but there's no exposure to that in the schools, and that's something that you can do without a college degree as a teenager.
I feel like Adam keeps rolling out his resume, his certificates, his licenses, his degrees, his certificates.
Oh, I don't have any degrees.
Okay, I'm sorry. Take that one back. But we had a show called MacGyver in the 1980s, and it was about this guy that could, he could make a flamethrower out of a vacuum, right? And I'm sitting here, I'm starting to think I'm sitting next to MacGyver on this show.
When I was a little kid, I used to wake up at 5 a.m. before school to watch reruns of MacGyver.
So I got that one right. Hey, I want to switch real quick here.
The kind of practical experience, the kind of practical knowledge that we're talking about adding back to school boards, I think this is a really critical mission, because what has happened with our school boards in many places, and I'm not familiar with the individual board members in Fort Bend County right now, but I believe this is a school district. You have about 79,000 kids in that school district.
Correct.
Is that about right?
Just shy of 80,000.
I mean, this is a massive. Yeah, this is one of the largest school districts in the world. Or in the country, and you've got, I looked at this about 3 years ago, but at that time you had something like a ratio of staff to students of 8 students per staff. And I was astonished by that number. I couldn't imagine how you could have so many staff. Now, what we've seen in high schools as well as in colleges is an expansion of the administrative functions, not of the educational side. And we've seen them taking away programs in many schools, like the shop classes we talked about.
Right.
So the idea of bringing some practical knowledge back to a school board, where in the school boards that I've visited, they're staffed by people who are ideological radicals. And their social agenda is what they're really promoting into these schools. And of course, that's destructive to education. That's destructive to society as a whole. So I don't know, again, the people you're running against. I just know that's what I see when I look at school boards.
Well, we need to get back to the foundations of our roots, of our country. That's essentially what everyone, this conversation is saying. But I want to say on that subject, there's a new superintendent in Fort Bend schools.
There is.
And I don't know if this is true, but I heard that he is a proponent of DEI. And I'll let Adam answer that. But before Adam answers it, G2, can you explain what DEI is?
Sure. So DEI, which sounds great, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. What it sounds like a system or a philosophy where everyone's going to get equal treatment. What it actually turns into is very much a Marxist ideology that says everyone must have an equal outcome. So it won't matter how hard you study or how hard you work. In their minds, every person should have an equivalent outcome. So somebody who studies 20 hours and passes the exam with an A should get the same outcome as somebody who studies 5 hours and passes it with a D, or gets past it with a D, because what they want to focus on isn't your performance or your effort or your skill set, but rather your gender or your race, your ethnicity. Those are the defining characteristics of DEI. So while it's painted with this brush of kindness and inclusion, underneath DEI is a dark Marxist ideology that is destructive to our society. It is just a bad thing. And it comes out of that whole Marxist ideology that was born, that really got a foothold around the world about 100 years ago. So they've learned how to dress it up. They've learned how to put a nice name on it. But that's what it is, and it is destroying the education of our children in many school systems. Parents generally don't know it's there, and when they find out, for example, by looking at books that are in some of our schools, by looking at what the teachers are actually doing, parents really become distressed, and a lot of that happened in 2020 with the online classes where parents could hear the teachers and see the materials for the first time.
Well, it's race-based Marxism. And at its roots, it's racial division. It's pitting the children against one another, and it's evil at its roots. Do you know if DEI is a component at Fort Bend schools, or if there's any administrators who are promoting it?
Well, as far as the new superintendent goes, I have seen zero indication that he's a proponent for DEI.
Okay, good.
In fact, on the flip side, I had about four. I was very much so failed by the school system. I had about 4 or 5 educators over my life that really stood out. That were, I can say, hey, these people are a factor to who I became in 2024. And he reminds me of particularly one of these guys. But I think he's actually going to be pretty awesome.
Okay.
He's a big proponent for. Big into the whole CTE. He'd be sitting here agreeing with the three of us over, implementing welding class back in and small engine repair auto shop, and he's a very smart guy, and I think he's got a lot on his plate, taking over, stepping into a new district that's been going through some issues with, that they separated from their last superintendent, and there was apparently some bad blood. So there's a lot that he's working with, and he's probably sitting back and watching, still figuring out how he's going to address some things.
I was told that by a parent at a networking event, and I didn't know if it was true or not. I just thought I'd come here to clear the air.
Yeah, I haven't seen any kind of indication.
Excellent, very good.
Yeah.
Is DEI a driving focus in Fort Bend schools in general?
I haven't heard much talk about DEI. I from what I understand, that's more kind of a West Coast issue.
Okay.
But not to say that it couldn't become a South Coast issue.
Well, one of the things I do know that's happening.
Yeah, just to interject, it is much more than a West Coast issue. It is in school boards all over the nation. It is in school districts all over the nation. If you look at Fort Bend, you'll find a diversity handbook. I just looked. You'll find some other things. So it is there. It doesn't appear on the top of the first page of the website, so they aren't pushing it possibly as hard. But this is something that, as a board member, it would be something for a new board member to really study, understand, and be quite attentive to, and let parents know what's going on. Because it is actually not West Coast. It is everywhere.
Right.
And it's sometimes surprising where it is, because it's also in private schools. People think, well, that's okay. I'll put my kid in private schools. Guess what?
Right.
The private schools went first with this gender ideology.
Well, and that's one of the things that I am a big proponent of is transparency, and I believe that schools should, because they are a government entity, they should the same laws to open records requests should be handled in the same manner. There should be policies on open records requests, and no different than it would be for a police department. And every piece of documentation at a school should be 100% public record, and there shouldn't be any reason for a lack of transparency, and that should be something that parents can see if that kind of thing is going on with their children.
One of the things that I sort of think is happening is that for the first time, or recently, Fort Bend, the school board became majority Republican, and I believe that this new school board is doing everything they can to correct the issues, and I feel like they are a target of the media and the American left more than any other county, because we are a majority Republican for the first time in some time, school board at Fort Bend ISD. David Hamilton is a Fort Bend school board member, and right now he's driving an issue to, I believe, expose vulgar materials in the libraries. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I actually got a few notes on this because, House Bill 900 was passed, which amended 33021 of the Education Code, which is the library standards, and it basically, at the end of the day, it distributing certain material even through a school, that certain material that's vulgar or the keywords are raises sexual interest in a child is violation. It violates the penal law, 43.24 Penal Code, and now it is clear cut because there used to be an exception to 4324, where if it was for medical or educational purposes, it was an affirmative defense to the prosecution, but that's no longer the case. And the changes to 33021 of the Education Code require school boards to enact policy that lays out when certain materials are educational and when they are not. So potentially educators could now be actually charged criminally under the Penal Code if they display certain sexually gratifying materials to children.
G2, do you have any comments on that?
Tremendous improvement.
Mm-hmm.
I do. If you're, there are books that are in schools around the country that if any adult gave one to a child in their community, that adult would be subject to imprisonment because the books are fundamentally explicit and pornographic. And it is astonishing to see these in schools and in libraries. But schools and libraries have had, in many states, a specific carve-out from the obscenity laws to allow them to be able to discuss things like human biology and reproduction systems, right?
Right.
Reproduction organs and so on. So educational materials. But that carve-out has been used to provide these educators who have an aggressive focus on their sexuality. They've used that carve-out to present this material to children. And I don't mean high school. I'm talking about elementary school children being exposed to graphic discussions about sexuality. So a law that forbids that from the school is a smart law that should be implemented because it is time for America to protect our children. We just simply can't have these people in these schools having the conversations they're having with little kids about who's having sex with whom and the various methodologies they use in their sexual exploits. It's wildly inappropriate. It is not educational.
Right. And the other thing that I'd like to attempt to implement would be a parental advisory board where it is now I've created a foundation of parents who the sole purpose of the foundation would be to review library books and make sure that there are age appropriate books, and B, nothing that's nothing that's sexually gratifying. That's the words used in the law, and make sure that, and actually be able to vote on amongst themselves, hey, this is wrong, this is not, and then those results could be brought before the board, and we could assure that they're in accordance with 33021 of the Education Code and go forward. But one of the problems, and we were talking about the school choice, one of the reason that I think that school choice is such a big issue right now is the parents are feeling like there's a big disconnect between the education system and them as parents, and they don't have much say. Well, I'm running to give parents that say and have that open line of communication, and to be an advocate for them and make sure that there's nothing that they don't want their kids being exposed to in the schools. And if there is something, then parents have the right to remove the children from viewing those things that they don't want their kids to see.
33021, right? That's the
Yes.
law. Is that a new law?
No, 33021. So that's under the Education Code, the library standards. That's been around, but it was amended to where the school boards are now required to lay out policy on sexually explicit material, and essentially what the vast majority of school boards are going on is, well, if it's not in the predetermined curriculum, it is. Well, it no longer needs to apply because, now there's a lot of liability on individuals who are employees of the schools, potential Class A misdemeanors and, jail time.
Okay, so the law states, I apologize, I need to understand the law one more time. It states that if an educator has improper books in the library, that they can be prosecuted?
So I'll pull it up for you. 33021, that's the library standards. So what they would be prosecuted under is the Penal Code 3224, which I'll pull up right here for you. But that's the actual offense. If you, like, for example, if you provide a child with literal porn, you have violated 3224, the Penal Code, and there was an exemption, and there still is an exemption for educational, medical, or law enforcement purposes. And what this change does is now it is only that exemption only applies if it is a part of a curriculum that the school board approves. So first off, there's no curriculum that actually is distributing porn, so that would be some teacher doing something freelance as opposed to, it actually being a part of a curriculum.
The question I have is why does the American left want to push this stuff on kids? Do either of you have any idea why they're doing this? G2?
I have an idea, of course. I think that the people who have launched this, first of all, they have a penchant for destroying the nuclear family. They want this nuclear family broken down. When you look at some of their organizations, they have in their bylaws or in their mission statements destroying the nuclear family. I also think that there is a contingent of people in here who have very aggressive focuses on their sexuality and who they have sex with. They want constant praise for that. That's why you see these parades where people are, dressed very scantily, performing in front of children. I think there's also a certain element of society that has become very powerful that has an interest in kids. That's why we now hear no longer we're not supposed to use the term pedophile anymore. We're now supposed to use the term minor attracted persons. I think it's a movement. We've seen it infect every part of society. And for parents that don't understand, that think this isn't a real thing, you can go back and look at some of the books that Florida took out of the schools. One is called Genderqueer. It's very famous. One is called Not All Boys Are Blue. One is called It's Perfectly Normal. If you look up some of the books that have been removed from schools, not banned, they're still allowed to be purchased by parents if they want to show their kids this material somehow, but have been banned from schools where they're not an appropriate material. They're certainly not age appropriate for middle school and elementary school and even high school students. Look at the books. You'll be shocked to find out that they are penetrating school systems all over the country. So having a law like that says, yes, one thing to have educational materials, but it should not be sexually explicit and grooming children sexually. That's the right kind of law to pass, and I think that's a major step forward. I think that kind of law every state should be taking a look at. Most importantly, having school board members who are going to stand watch, who are going to guard the children in those schools by being vigilant and watching for this kind of bizarre material to flood into schools. That's a critical element. Where I've seen this happen in great concentrations, I've seen school boards that are just made up of radicals who support this stuff. And when you walk into a school in some districts, you'll see gender specific kind of materials and sexuality information on the walls. I was in a school once about 2 years ago. Every single classroom had either a gay flag or a trans flag on it and some sexualized material. I couldn't understand for the life of me why that was important in a high school. Why every single room, every billboard, every poster was all about gender. We've got to have school board members who will stand watch, who will protect our children, and who are aware that this is happening and dedicated to stopping it.
So I started out this show with a full description of the school choice bill that Governor Abbott brought to the Senate, to the House for a vote. The Democrats opposed it. And it's funny because there's a Democrat, his name is Jose Mendez out of San Antonio, and he tried to amend the school choice bill to include in it a part that states that if a child tells a teacher or a staff member that child is a homosexual, that staff member cannot go tell the parents. So right there you have the Democrats with their insidious ideas promoting this sick ideology on the kids, and then attempting to create a wall between parent and student and child, parent and child, to divide. And I just, how more wrong can a party be? I feel like it loses its legitimacy as a political party when it starts to go down this road. You have something to say on that, Adam?
Well, we need to make sure that there are age appropriate books for the kids, and the big thing that so I pulled up the law just to make sure. 4324, sale, distribution, or display of harmful material, and a person commits offense if knowing that the material is harmful, and harmful is defined as dominant theme, takes as a whole, appeals to the prurient interest of a minor in sex, nudity, or excretion. But a person commits an offense if he or she distributes that type of material to a minor. And it is now clear-cut in the law under House Bill 900 that can't be displayed to children anymore, and whoever does is committing a criminal offense. So, but I mean, as far as school board, I am a huge proponent to, protecting our children, from both mind and body, from physical harm, and I'm not afraid to take the hit for our kids. I have for years and throughout my career. But yeah, it's apparent. I don't understand why people would want to distribute pornographic or sexually gratifying information to our children.
Well, I think one of the solutions I hear coming from every our conversation here is that parental advisory committee. That can be the group that steps in and gives the school board does the manpower, does all that research, because of course the school board can't do everything, hands off the recommendations to the school board. But we're going to finish up here. Adam, could you please tell us again what your name and what you're running for?
Yeah, I'm Adam Schoaf, and I'm running for Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees, position number 2 in Fort Bend County. And I have a website, fortbendforadam.com, that I've got laid out my views and beliefs, if anybody be interested in looking at it.
G2, it was great having you on. Thank you very much, Adam. This is Chris Heasley with The Chris Heasley Show. We will be back here on Monday at 1 p.m. Thank you very much.